Zhang Yi panicked, not expecting the Special Forces team from West Mountain Base to bring out a bunch of C4 explosives. After the Special Forces team discovered that bullets were unable to inflict any damage on the house, team leader Shinhong realized that the opponent in front of them was not ordinary. He was fully capable of capturing or even killing Xia Huanhuan and Lu Ziang. Shinhong ordered a halt to the meaningless shooting, deciding to first clear the ground traps. These were veterans experienced in warfare, who quickly located the grenades using modern technology, even uncovering the deeply buried anti-tank mines laid by Zhang Yi. However, every move they made was clearly observed. Zhang Yi decisively pressed the remote detonation device. The anti-tank bomb's power was astonishing, instantly killing the two soldiers closest to it. The shockwave also sent 3 nearby soldiers flying. Shinhong's eyes were almost bleeding with rage. Who exactly is he? Why does he have things only our troops possess? This scene made many think of retreating. The deputy commander hurriedly stepped forward to persuade. We don't yet fully understand the situation here, nor do we have heavy weapons and bomb disposal equipment. Let's return to base for instructions to avoid further casualties. Deputy Commander Yu Lang was still sensible. He had already sensed that this opponent was not someone they could handle, but Shinhong flatly rejected his suggestion. Aren't we the rescue team sent here? If we have to go back for support, where would I put my face? I don't believe the shelter has no weaknesses. Continue the attack. Shinhong was already too agitated. Eager to perform well in such an important mission, he couldn't return without any achievements. As the vanguard, he at least needed to gather some crucial intelligence about the villa. Otherwise, the deaths of those 6 brothers would be in vain. Shinhong ordered everyone to spread out and advance towards the shelter without any dead angles. His aim was to gather more information about the villa, hoping to find a weakness and avenge his fallen comrades. Yang Mi watched the scene with a worried expression. They looked so professional. They couldn't really find a flaw, could they? Zhang Yi, however, was not at all panicked. I have great confidence in the shelter. I practically check it every day. There are no external vulnerabilities. But Yang Mi was still worried. It's scary to have them searching so recklessly. Are you suggesting we should take the initiative to attack and stop their search? Attacking them is actually quite simple. I just want to see what other methods they have. After an investigation, the Special Forces team concluded this villa is just a defensively formidable iron fortress made of extremely advanced materials. However, its only flaw is that it cannot launch an offensive. They helplessly gazed at the villa, saying, it's not surprising to find such a structure in a wealthy area. It's just a rich man's fear of death that led to the creation of this iron turtle. Now that we've cleared the traps around his house, they can just wait to be attacked. At that moment, Shinhong had a sudden inspiration. We can concentrate the explosives and blow open a corner of the house, then rush in and finish them off. The deputy commander pondered. How much explosive would that require? Shinhong sneered. On the battlefield, even the most fortified bunkers can be blown open with enough explosive. Could his villa be more fortified than a military bunker? As long as we focus our firepower, we can definitely do it. So, everyone gathered their explosives at what they thought was the weakest point, ready to detonate. Seeing this, Zhang Yi immediately rose from his chair and said coldly, you think I've run out of tricks just because I've been holding back? Today, I'll teach you a good lesson. He then turned to Zhou Qir and Yang Mi behind him. You guys just stay here and enjoy the show. If you're scared, you can go hide in the basement. After placing all the explosives together, the leader decisively pressed the detonation button. A thunderous explosion followed, and everyone thought that if it couldn't flatten the building, it would at least create a breach. The massive explosion created a blizzard-like spread. Everyone eagerly advanced to inspect the effect of the explosion, but when the dust settled, they were all dumbfounded. A deep pit was formed on the ground, but the main building seemed completely unharmed. Everyone couldn't believe their eyes. The area below the wall was covered in some black material, meaning the villa was essentially a 360-degree alloy fortress. Team leader Shinhong was instantly stupefied. It seems we really need to go back and ask for support. The level of weapons we have is simply not enough. We must call the demolition team with larger quantities of explosives. To Zhang Yi, the mere dozen or so C4 explosives were hardly worth a glance. After all, this shelter was built to withstand nuclear attacks. He went to the second floor and took out a sniper rifle from a different space. At that moment, Deputy Commander Yu Lang's men brought over a heavy box. Upon opening it, Shinhong was overjoyed. How did you manage to bring this? This is excellent. It's a heavy sniper rifle capable of destroying a tank in one shot. Yu Lang aimed at the shelter's glass, confidently saying, even if that's bulletproof glass, it's unlikely to withstand my shot. Just as Zhang Yi reached the second floor with his sniper rifle, a loud gunshot rang out, startling him. Could this be the heavy sniper? A screeching friction sound came from the external glass. Zhang Yi went closer and saw a small white scratch on the glass. This is serious. If they were to fire millions of rounds like this, the glass might actually crack. Terrifying. Meanwhile, Yu Lang, holding the heavy sniper, began to question his life choices. After 2 seconds of silence, he broke down. I've used this gun to penetrate bunkers before. How could a mere villa? Shinhong came over to comfort him. The defensive power of this villa might be even more terrifying than West Mountain Base. It's seems we should return and report to our superiors. We're almost out of weapons. Shinhong immediately ordered a retreat. Zhang Yi, observing from the second floor, saw them preparing to leave. He immediately ordered the windows to be opened and activated a dimensional gate in front. This meant all attacks from outside would be absorbed into the alternate space, while Zhang Yi's own attacks would remain unaffected. He set up his sniper rifle and aimed. When the retreating soldiers noticed the window opening, one shouted, "Captain Shin, the window on the second floor of the villa seems to be open." As they reported, they did not hesitate to shoot. As elite soldiers, their marksmanship was highly accurate, aiming straight for Zhang Yi's face. However, their bullets disappeared like stones sinking into the sea, all vanishing before reaching Zhang Yi. He smirked. "I've taken a fancy to that heavy sniper. It's not something ordinary people can get their hands on. Since you've come, don't think about leaving." As they fired, Zhang Yi also pulled the trigger, targeting the soldier carrying the box. Shinhong, seeing the figure on the second floor of the villa, showed a hint of joy. "I thought I had no way to get you, but now you've opened the window yourself. Everyone, fire at him." 20 people raised their guns and fired wildly, but Zhang Yi, with one hand on the dimensional gate and the other aiming and shooting calmly, accurately shot each in the head. It took the fall of 6 soldiers before they realized, why can't our bullets hit him? Shinhong's pupils shrank sharply. This guy might be a mutant. Yu Lang, beside him, also widened his eyes. Could his ability be immunity to all attacks? Shinhong immediately ordered a retreat, knowing that if the opponent was indeed a mutant, they couldn't handle him with just their team. They all turned and ran. Shinhong shouted to his teammates, "Don't worry about the fallen brothers for now. Find cover quickly." Zhang Yi, through his scope, spotted the 2 team leaders and aimed at them, but with one shot, Shinhong and Yu Lang instantly disappeared from their spot, narrowly evading his attack. Zhang Yi was familiar with this scene. The same move had surprised him during the fight with Lu Ziang. Could these two be like that man, mutants transformed through modifications, even with almost identical abilities? After scanning the area, Zhang Yi realized that only 2 people seemed to have special abilities. He devised a plan and fired another shot, this time aiming not for the head, but for the legs of the soldiers. 2 soldiers who couldn't evade in time fell to the ground, clutching their legs in agony. Their comrades, witnessing such a scene, desperately wanted to rush out to help. They could bear the pain of leaving the bodies of their fallen brothers behind, but couldn't stand the thought of not helping their close comrades. However, Shinhong stopped them. "Nobody move. He's trying to draw us out. Rushing out now is suicide." Shinhong, still maintaining his calm, immediately thought of a countermeasure and shouted, "Throw all the smoke and incendiary grenades out." Instantly, the area near the injured soldiers was engulfed in rolling white smoke and blazing flames. With this approach, even with tactical goggles, no one could see anything. Shinhong took this opportunity to quickly send people for the rescue. Zhang Yi couldn't help but inwardly commend. They really are professional soldiers with combat discipline. He then smirked wickedly and reversed the direction of the dimensional gate. In the next second, all the bullets that had been absorbed into the alternate space suddenly poured out like a violent storm, instantly turning the 2 injured soldiers and 4 rescuers into sieves. Everyone was furious at this tactic, which was beyond their comprehension. Trembling, the soldiers said, "This man isn't human. We can't possibly fight against him." A young soldier, completely breaking down, shouted at Shinhong, "Captain, let's send a distress signal. Ask the base to send the battalion commander." Shinhong grabbed the soldier's collar. "Shut up. Weren't we the ones who came to rescue? Now asking for rescue ourselves. Where would that leave my face as the captain?" The soldiers were in utter despair, looking at their captain with terrified eyes. "That person is an invincible demon. How can we possibly stand against him? Rather than dying here, I'd rather be sent to the 4th life pod to pedal a bicycle." The Special Forces team was in a difficult situation, but Deputy Commander Yu Lang tried to reassure everyone. "Calm down, everyone. The fact that he's hiding inside and not coming out shows he still fears our strength. Let's keep our spirits up." Shinhong, looking worried, said gravely, "His marksmanship is as good as ours. We could be sniped at any moment. We can't just keep hiding here." Yu Lang then drew a plan in the snow, explaining his strategy. "His villa doesn't have a view without blind spots. If we break through a few houses in front of us and move through them, as long as we're out of his sight, even the best marksmanship won't help him." Zhang Yi, standing on his balcony, had probably guessed their escape plan. He didn't intend to leave the shelter to pursue them. Although their abilities were negligible, they were a highly coordinated team. Zhang Yi didn't want to take the risk. Moreover, his dimensional gate could only open in one direction. If he went out and faced attacks from multiple sides, it would be over. Meanwhile, at West Mountain Base, Chen Xinyan received a report from his secretary, Guro. He frowned deeply as he read, 12 soldiers killed. Shinhong and Yu Lang were ineffective, causing great loss to the base. I think they must be severely punished to set an example. Chen Xinyan pondered for a moment. In the past, he would have executed Shinhong and Yu Lang without hesitation, but now the base was short of personnel, and they had indeed brought back important intelligence. This isn't their fault. The opponent is too strong. But what's the background of this shelter? Why haven't I heard about it before? Is there any intelligence on this? Guro, prepared before coming, handed over a tablet displaying a map of Heavenly Sea City with several important locations marked. She briefed Qinxinyan methodically, based on the reports from Shenhong and Yulang, and combining previous intelligence. The most likely suspect is the warehouse manager Zhang Yi. The original owner of the shelter was the billionaire Wang Ximing, who reportedly spent $1 billion building it 10 years ago. It was taken as just entertainment news back then. However, now our engineers speculate that the shelter's defensive strength may surpass our West Mountain base. As for how Zhang Yi took over the shelter, that remains unknown. Qinxinyan couldn't help but remark, "This kid is truly a chosen one, so lucky." In his eyes, Zhang Yi was just a small-time figure who had stumbled upon good fortune. Such individuals, even if they acquired power, would be limited by their narrow vision and shallow knowledge, eventually overwhelmed by their own abilities, unable to compare with someone of his stature. Qinxinyan picked up the report again and read carefully. Southern warehouse manager, innate ability, immune to bullet attacks. Suddenly, he realized the crux of the matter. The place where Xia Huanhuan had trouble is only a few kilometers from his villa. He chased out of the shelter to kill Xia Huanhuan. Considering her ability to pass through walls, it's likely she discovered some damning secret of Zhang Yi's, giving him a reason to kill her. The biggest secret in the apocalypse is resources. A sharp glint appeared in his eyes. So, it seems the billions worth of resources from the southern warehouse are likely in his hands, hidden away with some ability. Excited, Qinxinyan exclaimed, "This explains everything. We must capture Zhang Yi." Guro, slightly startled by the revelation, did not forget to flatter Qinxinyan. "Congratulations, Lord Chen, for finding a massive amount of resources for our West Mountain base." Qinxinyan nodded in satisfaction, clearly intending to take credit for the potential discovery of the resources. He began to fantasize about the prosperous life ahead, almost as if the resources were already in his hands. Indeed, if we really secure these resources, they could sustain the base for decades. Tossing the file onto the table, he decisively ordered, "Get Ling Feng here." Soon, Ling Feng relayed instructions to the teams of Shenhong and Yulang, directing them to temporarily head to Su East Village across the river. This move served two purposes. Firstly, to investigate the surrounding area in advance, and secondly, to wait there for the follow-up troops. Ever since Zhang Yi had warned Chunlei, the timid Chunlei had been living in fear every day, dreading the possibility of West Mountain base sending troops to raid his village. His worst fears materialized when a group of fully armed soldiers suddenly appeared in Su East Village. Chunlei hurriedly called Zhang Yi, "Brother Zhang, something terrible has happened." Zhang Yi immediately guessed that the soldiers might have gone to Su East Village. "Chunlei, don't panic. Just remember, these people are not the so-called government. They're rampaging through Heavenly Sea City, collecting resources without any regard for morality or law. You must be careful to hide your resources well, and be even more careful about your life." Chunlei was extremely anxious, "But don't worry about me, boss. If I want to run, nobody can catch me. Even you couldn't catch me last time. The problem is that these people have been welcomed as honored guests by our village chief, and now they won't listen to any of my advice." Zhang Yi responded with a faint smile, "Then there's nothing you can do. Wise words can't persuade the destined to die. Just take good care of yourself and those around you." Suddenly, Zhang Yi's tone turned icy. "But let me remind you, I've always treated you like a brother. If you ever decide you don't want to work with me, I won't blame you. The only condition is that you must not betray me." Having experienced Zhang Yi's power and cherishing the limited edition collectibles Zhang Yi had, Chunlei quickly reassured, "Brother Zhang, you can count on me. I know you're the best to me." Zhang Yi originally wanted to call Chunlei to the shelter, but then had a change of heart. "Chunlei, I need more intelligence about West Mountain Base. Try to find out as much as you can about the soldiers' movements." Chunlei seemed reluctant. "Undercover work isn't my forte. Those soldiers are intimidating, and I get shaky just looking at them." Zhang Yi was somewhat exasperated. It seems this guy still doesn't realize his own strength. With his ability, he could easily freeze these soldiers in a fraction of a second. Why is he so timid? "Don't worry, I'm not asking you to fight them. Just probe around a bit. If you can get some important information, there'll be a reward for you," Zhang Yi assured. At this, Chunlei's face lit up. "Boss, you can count on me. I'll handle it perfectly." Meanwhile, in Su East Village, the village chief was busy attending to the soldiers, arranging accommodations and asking every household to contribute food and drink for them. When Chunlei approached the village chief from behind and called out to him, the chief turned around and scolded, "Didn't I tell you to hide at home and not come out? If the soldiers find out you're a mutant, they might take you away. What would happen to our village then?" Chunlei responded with a smile, "The fact that I'm a mutant will come out sooner or later. Even if our villagers keep quiet, can you be sure people from the neighboring village won't talk? They'll think you're hiding something and become wary of you. It's better to admit it now and use this opportunity to get closer to them." The village chief of Su East Village, after some thought, found Chunlei's suggestion reasonable. He then brought Chunlei to Shenhong and the others. "Gentlemen, this is my grandson, Su Chunlei. He's a mutant." Hearing that Chunlei was a mutant, everyone looked at him in surprise. Shenhong approached and asked, "You don't look like a mutant. What's your ability?" To gain the soldiers' trust, Chunlei replied, "See these snow houses? I built them all by myself." He then demonstrated his ability. With a slight lift of his right hand, a snowball rose into the air. The onlookers widened their eyes in amazement, dispelling any doubts. Shinhong, excited, draped an arm around Chun-Lei's shoulder and exclaimed, "Brother, you're amazing. I had no idea such a small village could harbor such talent." Discovering a mutant was a significant achievement. A natural mutant like Chun-Lei could hold a high position in West Mountain Base's special forces. Everyone hoped to build a good relationship with their potential future leader. Feeling elated, Chun-Lei turned to the village chief and said, "Little Su, prepare more food and drinks. I want to have a good time with the soldiers." During the feast, Chun-Lei gathered crucial intelligence and immediately called Zhang Yi. West Mountain Base has assembled a group of terrifyingly powerful mutant captains, ready to attack your shelter at any moment. They've brought a large amount of explosives for targeted demolition. After learning the details from Chun-Lei, Zhang Yi had newfound respect for him and expressed his concern. "Thanks to your information, you can come and pick up your figurines anytime." Then, with a hint of playfulness, Zhang Yi asked, "Fatso, haven't you ever thought about joining West Mountain Base? Following me might not be the best path." Chun-Lei smiled openly. "Brother Zhang, my heart has always been with you. I trust my instincts." As a sensitive anime fan, Chun-Lei could sense the soldiers' ill intentions, especially in the way they looked at the villagers, as if they were livestock. He couldn't imagine being part of such a group. While Zhang Yi might not be a gentleman, Chun-Lei saw him as a person of genuine character. Zhang Yi assured him firmly, "You will never regret your choice today. Keep an eye on their movements and contact me with any updates." Zhang Yi, deep in thought about countermeasures, contemplated the challenge of dealing with explosives. The main issue is handling the bombing. The stockpile of explosives at West Mountain Base could easily level 10 shelters like mine, but to place the explosives, they have to get close to the shelter first. That's when I'll take them down. He wasn't overly worried. After all, this was his home turf. Even if he couldn't hold the upper 2 floors, he could retreat to the underground levels. The true essence of the shelter lay in its 3 subterranean floors, impervious even to missiles. After summoning the women in the shelter and briefing them about the situation, he arranged for them to move underground. The women were understandably nervous, but Zhang Yi reassured them, "Don't worry at all. I've already assessed the strength of West Mountain Base. They can't threaten our safety." After delegating tasks, Zhang Yi went to the control room to check in with Yang Xinxin. "Xinxin, how's the task I assigned you coming along?" Yang Xinxin looked somewhat dejected. "I've been trying to hack into West Mountain Base's network these past few days, but I failed. It's not that my skills are lacking, but their internal network is a local area network. It's impossible to invade without accessing their internal network, and with the current network media in a paralyzed state, it's like trying to cook a meal without rice." Zhang Yi wasn't surprised by this outcome and consoled her. "I don't blame you. As long as we maintain our own security and prevent invasions, that's enough. If we can counter-infiltrate, great. If not, it's no big deal." Then, Zhang Yi visited Lu Karen's workshop and asked her seriously, "If you were a demolition expert at West Mountain Base, how would you deal with this shelter?" Lu Karen answered without hesitation, "For buildings, it's common to use TNT explosives with detonators, especially for dealing with old structures." Zhang Yi then inquired, "How much explosives do you think would be needed to blow a big hole in our shelter, considering its sturdiness?" Lu Karen scratched her head. "I don't have an exact concept of the shelter's strength, but based on the materials and thickness, at least 500 kilograms of explosives would be required." Zhang Yi pondered. Such a large quantity would be a very obvious target when being transported. "Couldn't I just detonate them prematurely with a sniper rifle?" However, Lu Karen shook her head. "That's unlikely to work. TNT is highly stable. It can't be detonated by bullets or even direct burning. It must be detonated using a detonator." Zhang Yi thought for a moment. "In that case, it seems I'll have to implement the second plan. How did the task I gave you last time turn out?" Lu Karen presented a bomb with a detonator. "This wasn't difficult for me. The scope is also ready. The hardest part was this," she said, pulling out a set of combat gear from the cabinet. She had put a lot of thought into making it, using the latest technological materials Zhang Yi had provided. It was so sturdy that it could resist most sniper rifle bullets. What puzzled her was, why did you want it made in the style of those soldiers' uniforms? Are you planning to infiltrate West Mountain Base? This is crucial. You'll understand when the time comes. Meanwhile, at West Mountain Base, a top-tier team was quickly assembled and set off towards Su Family Town. Shinhong and others had been waiting at the village entrance for some time. This mission was also voluntarily joined by Liang Yu, not to combat Zhang Yi, but to prepare for leading her students to escape later. Upon seeing Battalion Commander Ling Feng, Shinhong hurriedly confessed their failure. They had set out as a rescue team, but had ended up losing 12 soldiers without saving anyone. But Ling Feng didn't seem to blame them. This was an organizational misjudgment, underestimating the opponent's strength. "You need not be too hard on yourselves." Then Ling Feng's gaze suddenly turned cold, and he spoke with clenched teeth. "The person who killed my brothers, I'll tear him to pieces." Confidently looking at the powerful lineup behind the captain, Shinhong believed, this time, even if Zhang Yi is incredibly strong, he's going to suffer. Ling Feng then pointed at Chun-Lei. "Who is this guy?" Shinhong quickly introduced him. "This is a natural mutant I found after much effort. He can can control ice and snow, a man of limitless potential. Liang Yu, standing behind Ling Feng, recognized Chun Lei immediately. Isn't he the mutant who helped Zhang Yi take Yang Xinxin away last time? However, she chose not to reveal his identity, as her current priority was to escape from West Mountain Base with her students. Ling Feng scrutinized Chun Lei. You can control ice and snow? Chun Lei nodded nervously. Yes, all these ice houses in the village were built by me. Ling Feng patted Chun Lei's shoulder. After this operation, I'll recommend you to the higher-ups. You might even get a chance to be a team leader. Then Ling Feng started to deploy the operation. Based on the information we have, the enemy has very accurate marksmanship. Therefore, when the mine clearing and explosives placement team is in action, we must use smoke grenades to obscure his line of sight. As for his ability to ignore bullet attacks, our goal is to blow open the shelter, not to engage him directly. Meanwhile, inside the shelter, Zhang Yi was calmly reading a paperback book. Upon seeing the thick smoke outside through the surveillance system, he closed the book and put on the special combat suit made by Liu Karen. Zhang Yi told the women, "Stay in the basement and don't come up." What follows is a battle between men. Standing on the second-floor balcony, Zhang Yi looked out at the dense smoke and mused. Seems like they're scared of my sniping, but this is indeed a good strategy. Zhang Yi appeared confident, a meaningful smile creeping across his lips. So, it seems they are about to proceed with the demolition of the shelter. Ling Feng first arranged for the bomb disposal personnel to dismantle the traps around the villa. Their method was straightforward and brutal, not meticulously disarming each trap but rather using their own explosives for a saturation detonation. Zhang Yi couldn't help but admire their proficiency. They really know what they're doing. As the traps were cleared by the explosion, Ling Feng signaled, "Demolition team, move in. Everyone else, be ready to cover them." The bomb squad, each carrying heavy explosives, methodically placed them beneath the walls of the shelter. From inside, Zhang Yi watched their every move. Just place them and leave, like a delivery? Makes sense. They have to get to a safe distance to detonate them remotely. They can't risk being blown up. Looks like I overestimated them. They don't understand my abilities. Soon, Ling Feng received a signal on his radio. All bomb squad members have reached a safe distance, ready to detonate. Ling Feng's lips curled into a smile. Seems Zhang Yi isn't as capable as we thought. I was prepared for a tough fight during the explosive setup, maybe even losing some men, but this was easy. He pressed the detonation button, and everyone braced for the explosion. But after a few seconds, the sound and fury of the explosion seemed to disappear in a fraction of a second. A scout checked through binoculars, and his eyes widened in shock. The mountain of explosives disappeared in an instant, and the blast and flames seemed to be sucked away. There's only minimal damage to the wall. Ling Feng stamped his foot in frustration. This is unbelievable. Were the explosives devoured? Liang Yu's eyes sparkled with a strange light, thinking, Zhang Yi has such power. I need to find a way to cooperate with him. After pondering for a moment, Ling Feng tentatively concluded that Zhang Yi's ability was related to space. Remote bombing wouldn't work. Any amount of explosives sent would be instantly removed. Realizing the difficulty of the situation, Ling Feng still believed Zhang Yi's defensive abilities are extraordinary, suggesting he might not be strong in offense. The 4 team leaders with us are mutants, and based on their awakening methods, it's unlikely one person's ability covers both offense and defense. So, we don't need to rush. We'll leave some people to watch the shelter, making sure no one inside escapes, and go back to the base to devise a strategy. In the shelter at this time, Zhang Yi also arrived in the basement. Shou Kir hurried over to inquire about the situation. What was that tremor just now? It felt like the sky was about to collapse. Zhang Yi comforted her, saying, "You don't need to worry. Even if they breach the first 2 levels of our shelter, they can't threaten the 3 underground levels. In this billion-dollar shelter, I bet 800 million is spent on the underground part alone." Recalling the scene of the recently detonated explosives being absorbed into a different space, Zhang Yi muttered to himself, "I want to see how much more explosives they can bring to me for free." Several women, looking panicked, gathered around to ask about the situation. Zhang Yi reassured them with a smile. "You don't need to be too worried. The explosives they brought this time are already used up. We are temporarily safe. It will take time for them to go back and get more explosives. The West Mountain base is more than 50 kilometers from here. Even if they go back immediately to resupply, it will take them at least half a day to return, and I've already thought of a strategy to deal with them." Then, Zhang Yi went to the living room. While monitoring the outside situation, he asked Yang Mi to prepare food to replenish energy, as the primary source of energy for his special abilities was food. At this moment, Chun Lei suddenly sent a message. "Brother Zhang, the noise from your place scared me to death. I thought your villa area had been leveled. Now, many soldiers have returned to our village, and some have gone west." Zhang Yi immediately understood that they had indeed gone back for more explosives. What are the remaining people doing? Chun Lei complained. What else can they do? As soon as they came back, they started demanding food and drink, acting like lords. Zhang Yi couldn't help but worry about Chun Lei. He clearly understands that if this shelter can't be taken down soon, the worst affected will definitely be Su Family Town. It will surely become a base for the West Mountain base, and all the people in Su family town will have to serve them. Immediately, Zhang Yi reminded Chunlei, "You must always be cautious of these soldiers. If there's any danger, come to me at any time. Your brother will protect you." Chunlei was deeply moved and said, "Thank you, Brother Zhang. If things really come to that point, I will definitely come to you." After hanging up the phone, Zhang Yi pondered. He knew that a conflict between the West Mountain base and Su family town was inevitable. However, Zhang Yi didn't sympathize with them. Instead, he hoped they would break ties sooner. Meanwhile, Ling Feng returned to the base with his men to transport explosives. Captain Shi Daong and most of his men stayed in Su family town. He summoned the village head of Su East Village and Chunlei. "We plan to stay in the village for a while. You need to make room for us to stay, and remember to prepare meals for 65 people every day." The village head still didn't grasp the seriousness of the situation and agreed obsequiously. Chunlei felt a pang of concern. These soldiers eat so much, one can eat the portion of 5. If this continues, the village will eventually be drained. The village head of Su East Village was still fantasizing that the soldiers would only stay for a few days and leave after dealing with Zhang Yi. Anticipating a great reward afterward, he carelessly asked, "When will you be able to subdue that murderer Zhang Yi?" Upon hearing this, Shi Daong's eyes turned cold. "Don't ask what you shouldn't. Just take care of our food and lodging." Shi Daong's voice and physique were very imposing. The village head had no choice but to bow repeatedly in agreement. After Shi Daong left, the village head straightened up and commanded Chunlei in a stern tone, "Hurry up and build more ice houses for the important guests to live in. Remember, put extra effort into it." Chunlei remained silent in response to the village head's command. He knew very well that in the eyes of the villagers, no matter how strong he was just seen as a useless deadbeat. The next day, Ling Feng brought a large amount of explosives. Shi Daong, transformed into a giant ape along with many soldiers, arrived at a reverse slope. Then, Ling Feng and he, working together, hurled a massive bundle of explosives towards the shelter. Watching the flying explosives, Zhang Yi shouted dramatically, "Dimensional gate." Suddenly, a huge gate appeared above the shelter, and a surge of energy poured out. The explosives, which were supposed to hit the shelter, were instantly reflected back, almost along the same path. Ling Feng and his men were caught off guard, instinctively shouting, "Take cover." Everyone immediately hit the ground. Ling Feng was stunned. The TNT, as expected, was stable enough not to explode upon impact, but rather after the countdown of the detonator ended. A huge explosion formed a mushroom cloud, engulfing many soldiers in a fiery wave, even throwing those hundreds of meters away. Watching this scene, akin to a bonfire feast, absorbing and then releasing the explosive energy was initially just a bold experiment for Zhang Yi, but its success meant that he could continue using this method against them. Meanwhile, Ling Feng and his group were lucky that Jing Shuerong had timely created an ice barrier, which blocked most of the explosive impact. Ling Feng stood up disheveled, looking at the scene in front of him. The entire hill had been turned into a deep pit, with many Special Forces members burned to ashes. These were Ling Feng's brothers-in-arms, who had survived the apocalypse, but in a blink of an eye, they turned into black ash. He thought, anguished. Ling Feng pounded the ground in a rage, the atmosphere on the scene oppressively heavy. His look was more terrifying than an injured wild animal, yet he also tried to stay calm. Analyzing what had just happened, he soon guessed the process. Could it be that he used the explosive energy absorbed yesterday and released it, reflecting the thrown explosives back at us? While still pondering, suddenly a bullet mixed with special abilities was shot towards Ling Feng. With a sharp twist of his head, Ling Feng narrowly avoided the bullet, which whizzed past his ear. Turning towards the shelter, their eyes met, causing Zhang Yi's pupils to contract. That fierce look sends chills down the spine, truly befitting their leader. "It's a pity I didn't take him out." At that moment, Ling Feng felt a sense of alarm. As a soldier, he never expected Zhang Yi's sniper rifle to be effective over 2 kilometers away while still maintaining such lethal force. Ling Feng immediately warned everyone to take cover. However, Shi Daong, not being an agile mutant, was shot in the forehead. Yet, he didn't fall. He simply removed the bullet from his forehead with his bare hands, cursing and glaring in the direction of Zhang Yi. This shocked Zhang Yi. Such defense, comparable to a tank. I wonder if he's even stronger than Uncle Yu. All the leaders from the West Mountain base are tough nuts to crack. As Zhang Yi was about to take aim again, those few disappeared from his view. Simultaneously, 2 sharp bullets flew towards him. Zhang Yi quickly opened the dimensional gate, absorbing the bullets into a different space, and scoffed, "Trying to sneak attack me with a sniper shot?" Zhang Yi immediately reversed the direction of the bullets and sent them back along their original path. The 2 snipers from the base, among their top tier, would never know that the bullets that killed them were the very ones they had fired. While Zhang Yi was still searching for targets, a cloud of dust suddenly rose in the distance, as if something was charging towards him at a speed even his eyes couldn't track. Before he could react, a loud bang came from below, and the entire shelter felt a strong vibration. The self-check system immediately sent an alarm. Shelter impacted, wall damage at 0.03%. Zhang Yi was startled. When did he get here? If he hits the shelter with thousands of punches like that, it's going to be the end of this place. place. Ling Feng stared back at Zhang Yi with icy eyes. "You coward, come out and fight me one-on-one." Zhang Yi inwardly sighed, realizing it seems that conventional strength is hardly enough to harm him. But as long as I stay in this shelter, he can't do anything to me. The frustrated West Mountain base team had no choice but to return to Su Family Town. The village head of Su East Village greeted them with an obsequious smile. "Captain Ling, you must have won a great victory today. Has that demon Zhang Yi been killed?" The villagers nearby also looked excited. That huge explosion just now must have blown Zhang Yi to ashes. Captain Ling is truly formidable. The mood of the West Mountain base team was already at its lowest after their failed mission, and the villagers' flattery felt more like mockery. Shi Daong coldly ordered, "Shut up, all of you." It was then that the village head realized the soldiers' demeanor did not resemble that of victors. Ling Feng then approached and said, "Go and prepare more food for us. We expended a lot of energy today." After saying this, he headed towards the temporary housing. That forceful punch Ling Feng had thrown had consumed nearly half of his strength. Shi Daong didn't forget to turn back threateningly to remind the village head, "Remember, my portion should be the largest." The villagers dared not disobey, continually nodding in agreement. Once the soldiers were out of earshot, the villagers couldn't help but murmur among themselves, "It seems they failed today. So many people and they still couldn't handle one Zhang Yi. It's quite embarrassing." Although the villagers spoke softly, their words were overheard by the mutants with their exceptional hearing. Shi Daong even suggested teaching the villagers a lesson, but Ling Feng stopped him. "They still have some value, providing us with food and shelter. If we need to deal with them, we can do it after handling Zhang Yi. Then we can take them all to the base to peddle bicycles for electricity." Meanwhile, after the soldiers from the West Mountain base had retreated, Zhang Yi returned to the underground shelter. Shokir rushed over, anxiously asking, "Brother Zhang, are you alright?" Zhang Yi replied with a smile, "The ones who aren't alright are them." Yang Mi considerately prepared some food and brought it over. While eating, Zhang Yi asked Lu Karen, "If the wall is somewhat damaged, will it be difficult to repair?" Lu Karen pondered and said, "I've studied the alloy used in the shelter's walls. We just need some special materials. Even if I can get the materials we need, repairing the wall would require going outside. But it's not possible to go out now, right?" Zhang Yi replied with a smile, "I just need to know it can be repaired. There's no rush for this. I have plenty of time." Yang Mi looked worried. "I wonder how long this battle will last." Zhang Yi handed her a beer. "Don't worry, my favorite thing is to fight a war of attrition." Seeing this, the other girls came over to ask for beer too, lightening the atmosphere. After repelling the West Mountain base, Zhang Yi resumed his shameless way of life. However, a sudden phone call broke the tranquility. Yang Xinxin picked up the phone and turned pale. How could it be her? As a top hacker, she wasn't worried about someone hacking her phone. She sensibly handed the phone to Zhang Yi. It was a message from someone named Liang Yu, saying she and her classmates needed help and hoped Yang Xinxin could connect her with Zhang Yi. Upon seeing the name Liang Yu, Zhang Yi thought of the mutant from the Azure Sky Academy who wielded a long sword. Could she have joined the West Mountain base too? I still remember that swordswoman with her fierce swordsmanship. Even struggling with hunger for so long, she could fight evenly with flour. If she's at her full strength, her power must be even more terrifying. Zhang Yi became alert and asked Yang Xinxin and Lu Karen earnestly, "Tell me about this teacher Liang." They both looked grateful and said, "Although she has a stubborn and pure character, Teacher Liang is undoubtedly a good person. She could have easily survived on her own, yet she chose to risk her life protecting us, who were nothing but burdens to her." Zhang Yi pondered, if she's endured the brutal trials of the apocalypse, that's enough to prove her character. But now that she's joined the West Mountain base, I still have to be cautious. He then asked Yang Xinxin, by sending messages through the phone, "Is there a risk of our shelter's network being compromised by a virus?" Yang Xinxin confidently crossed her arms and reassured, "Brother, don't worry. I've told you before, the defense level of my phone is not inferior to the supercomputer in the control room. It's impossible for anyone to hack into it." Zhang Yi nodded awkwardly and sent a message to Liang Yu. "I am Zhang Yi. What do you want to talk about?" As a female captain-level mutant, Liang Yu had her own independent ice house. Receiving Zhang Yi's reply, she immediately called him. "Zhang Yi, I'm here to discuss a cooperation. My students are in danger at the West Mountain base, and I need your help." Zhang Yi replied sarcastically, "Don't joke with me. What kind of danger could there be in a shelter like the West Mountain base? Besides, aren't those students all from privileged backgrounds?" Liang Yu sounded a bit embarrassed. "I'm not joking. Their previous status and positions are worthless now. I'm sincerely seeking cooperation. I was part of the team that came to attack your shelter, and as a new captain, I might be able to assist you. But first, you need to agree to help my students escape from the West Mountain base." Zhang Yi was puzzled. Isn't the West Mountain base a large shelter? How could there be life-threatening danger there? And with Liang Yu's strength, how could she not protect a group of students? Zhang Yi was well aware that while he could ensure his own safety, launching an offensive against the West Mountain base was out of the question. He didn't immediately agree to Liang Yu's conditions. Instead, he asked her for all the information she had about the West Mountain base. To show her sincerity, Liang Yu shared all the information she knew with Zhang Yi. Zhang Yi quickly grasped the key point. So the West Mountain Base is indeed conducting experiments on artificial mutations, albeit with a very low success rate so far. Shokir, looking horrified, said, "The West Mountain Base is like a living hell. If the people from the fourth life pod are turned into protein solution, who will generate electricity for them?" Zhang Yi chuckled dismissively. "There are still quite a few people alive. Even if only 5% of the population survived, that's still a significant number. Look at Su family town across the river. There are thousands of survivors there, but I guess they'll eventually be captured for experiments, experiencing cycling for electricity and artificial mutations." Lu Karen, ever innocent, was worried about her classmates. "When I heard they went to the West Mountain Base, I was happy for them, but the more I hear, the scarier it gets. If I had known this, it would have been better to stay at Azure Sky Academy." Now Zhang Yi understood why Liang Yu was seeking his help. However, he told her, "The West Mountain Base is too heavily guarded. With my abilities alone, it's impossible to rescue those privileged students. My power is for self-defense. Expecting me to go out and save people is overestimating my abilities." Although Liang Yu was somewhat disappointed, Zhang Yi's response was within her expectations. She understood the principle of mutual exchange. "If I can offer you something valuable enough, would you take the risk for us?" Zhang Yi chuckled lightly. "Whether I'm willing to act depends on the value of what you offer. Contact me again when you have something worthwhile." He then ended the call. Turning to Yang Xinxin, he said, "You mentioned before that if we plant a Trojan horse into the West Mountain Base's network, we could completely infiltrate their system, right? It seems like a good opportunity is presenting itself." In Su family town, Ling Feng, having been repelled, gathered his most trusted subordinates in his room that night to discuss strategies against Zhang Yi. Ling Feng shared his insights. "Although our previous attacks failed, we've more or less figured out what Zhang Yi's special abilities are. Conventional weapons are no use. They just get absorbed and reflected back. Fortunately, his offensive means are limited. He doesn't dare leave the shelter and can only threaten us with sniping. There are blind spots in his shelter's defenses. Not every angle is covered by windows. So, I plan for us mutants to take turns attacking these blind spots, while having the villagers of Su family town dig tunnels for underground blasting. Our surface attacks are just a diversion to draw Zhang Yi's attention. Our real goal is to dig through the tunnels and blast from below." Liang Yu was horrified at Ling Feng's plan. "You're making the villagers of Su family town do hard labor in these extreme cold conditions. This intense work will surely lead to many of them freezing or working to death. You're sending them to their deaths." Ling Feng responded coldly, "I don't care about their lives. Zhang Yi has already killed hundreds of their villagers. Without us, they stand even less chance against Zhang Yi. Some sacrifices are necessary for final victory. Military discipline is about following orders. We must use every means necessary to take down Zhang Yi's shelter." Liang Yu clenched her fists in anger, shaking with emotion. "But those are innocent villagers. I'm not a soldier. I can't do this." Ling Feng stared intensely at Liang Yu. "The moment you joined the special forces, you became one. Unless you have a better strategy, you must follow orders." Xing Xuerong, sensing the tense atmosphere, quickly chimed in, "This is a desperate measure. Zhang Yi has a lot of resources crucial for the West Mountain Base. In these apocalyptic times, we can't afford to show mercy to others. Protecting ourselves and those close to us is already a challenge, like your students, for instance." Liang Yu calmed down when her students were mentioned. Her sense of justice made it hard for her to tolerate such actions, but she knew well that she was no match for Ling Feng. Confronting them directly would not only be suicidal, but also endanger her students. Xing Xuerong continued, "Digging tunnels is not the same as being cannon fodder. They're used to farming. This shouldn't be too hard for them." Liang Yu stood up, somewhat helplessly. "You arrange it, but I hope you can prioritize human life and try to avoid casualties among the villagers." After a whole night of discussion, they formulated a battle plan. Ling Feng called the village head to gather everyone in the village. Dozens of soldiers, armed with rifles, looked at the villagers as if they were prisoners. Ling Feng picked up a megaphone and shouted, "The murderer Zhang Yi across the river. We have invested a lot of manpower and resources, but this man is extremely cunning and deceitful. Now we need the cooperation of the villagers to dig tunnels and eradicate Zhang Yi, that demon." The villagers were not convinced and whispered angrily, "They eat our food, drink our water, and now they want us to do hard labor. This is outrageous." The village head tried to pacify them. "Everyone, calm down. The organization is thinking of our village's long-term peace." The villagers were confused. "We've been living in peace with Zhang Yi. It was us who attacked him first, and he just retaliated." They grumbled in discontent. Liang Yu watched this scene with a sigh, thinking Ling Feng's decision could lead to the deaths of many innocent villagers. Upon receiving Liang Yu's intelligence, Zhang Yi was slightly startled. "I hadn't considered an underground blast, but given the lack of digging equipment and the extreme cold weather, the progress of such a project would undoubtedly be very slow. I don't need to worry about it in the short term." Zhang Yi had already devised a counter-strategy. He decided to play along with their plan, letting them dig the tunnel. When they were close to completion, he would destroy the tunnel, enjoying the look of surprise on their faces. Liang Yu, however, was anxious upon hearing this. "But this way, it will be the villagers who will suffer. After all, the people from West Mountain Base are just supervising. Zhang Yi dismissed this concern and swiftly changed the subject, asking Liang Yu, which room are you staying in? Liang Yu was puzzled. Are you planning to come and find me? Zhang Yi smiled mysteriously. This is key to whether you and your students can escape. Liang Yu then described her location relative to Chun Lei's lavish castle. The next day, everyone moved according to the plan to attack the shelter. Zhang Yi watched this with a sense of irony. Beside him, Zhou Qi and Yang Mi were attentively serving him. One peeled seeds while the other brought water. Their competitive behavior made Yang Xinxin and Lu Karen feel envious. Lu Karen broke the awkward silence. This Ling Feng is quite formidable. His attacks are beyond ordinary weapons. Zhang Yi joked, they are the top forces of West Mountain Base, so it's not surprising. He then playfully added, look at the dangerous world outside, while we can eat and stay warm inside. You must cherish this. The implication was clear. They should show their gratitude. The women nodded in agreement, aware that all this was thanks to Zhang Yi. Yang Mi expressed her concerns. Although we know their plan, staying inside all the time isn't a long-term solution. We can't know the progress of their work. Zhang Yi looked towards Yang Xinxin. Explain it to your sister, will you? Yang Xinxin looked at Yang Mi as if she were looking at a fool, proudly explaining, sound travels faster in solids than in air, and being in the basement, we can feel it more clearly. With a sound wave receiver, I can precisely analyze their construction distance through the computer. Your brain probably can't understand this. Yang Mi seemed to have an epiphany. So, we don't have to do anything, just wait? Zhang Yi nodded with a smile. They are all working in vain. We just need to rest and conserve our strength, enjoying their performance. After several hours of assault, Ling Feng and his team decided to take a brief rest. They walked back, stopping by the digging site to check on the progress. The tunnel was filled with shouts and cries of distress. Soon, a man was carried out on a stretcher. After a quick examination, the military medic shook his head. It's an acute myocardial infarction. It's unlikely he'll survive. At this, a young man couldn't hold back his anger. He threw down his shovel and yelled furiously, you're inhuman, treating us like animals. I won't do this anymore. The overseer, Shin Hong, gripping his AK, coldly replied, we're doing this for your revenge. He then aimed his gun at the villager. We've come this far. If you dare disobey orders, you'll be treated as a deserter. Liang Yu, in a state of urgency, called Zhang Yi. At this rate, at least 100 villagers will die. Can't you think of something to minimize the casualties of these innocent people? Zhang Yi, calm and collected, smiled. This is all within my expectations, but I've noticed that fewer special forces soldiers have been attacking the shelter these past few days. Where have the others gone? Do they have another mission? Liang Yu answered, with the increasing number of villager casualties, the mood has become very tense. So, Ling Feng has left some men in the town to maintain order. She laughed nervously. They say it's to keep order, but it's really just to suppress any potential uprising. After the call, Zhang Yi had a new plan in mind. It's been days since our last confrontation. Ling Feng and his team must have let their guard down. If I don't shake them up a bit, they might think I'm just hiding in the shelter, waiting to be captured. It seems a little shock is in order for them. The next day, Zhang Yi donned a special combat suit made by Lu Karen, preparing to take Flower out for a spin. The shelter had an emergency exit known only to Zhang Yi, leading to a 3-kilometer-long underground tunnel that ended at a tombstone in the hills behind a public cemetery. Even Zhang Yi had not expected that Wang Siming would create an emergency exit in a cemetery. Taking a snowmobile from his different space, Zhang Yi headed straight to Su Family Town. The guards at the village entrance quickly spotted Zhang Yi's figure. Assuming he was a returning frontline captain due to the captain's armband on his combat suit, he saluted him. Before he could react, Zhang Yi swiftly took him out with his knife, eliminating all the guards silently and storing their bodies in his different space. Although Zhang Yi and Flower were capable of overpowering them, he preferred not to make too much noise. However, the scent of blood alerted the military dogs, which began barking furiously. The well-trained dogs would not bark without reason. Sensing danger, the Special Forces team rushed outside. Upon seeing Zhang Yi skulking about, they opened fire, but to their horror, their bullets seemed to be sucked into a strange vortex. Zhang Yi, wielding the dragon's roar, went on a frenzied spree of slashing and hacking. The scene instantly turned chaotic with limbs and severed arms flying about. The commotion quickly alerted Ling Feng. Meanwhile, the villagers at the construction site heard the gunfire. Is someone setting off fireworks? Ling Feng, hearing the gunfire, immediately turned serious and ordered, let's go back and investigate. By this time, Zhang Yi had already taken Chun Lei and made their escape, but Chun Lei expressed concern. Brother Zhang, our snowmobile tracks are too obvious. Won't your emergency exit be exposed? Zhang Yi was unfazed, confidently storing the snowmobile and saying, anyone with a brain could eventually find this place. It was bound to be exposed sooner or later, but I'm not worried about it. A meaningful smile played on Zhang Yi's lips. I'm actually looking forward to them coming after me. Back in the village, Ling Feng, seeing the bodies of his special forces soldiers scattered everywhere, was infuriated. He had thought his strategy of openly attacking while secretly digging a tunnel was foolproof, but instead, his base had been infiltrated. He realized there must be a traitor in his ranks, or else Zhang Yi wouldn't have dared to leave the shelter. Xing Shuerong was suspicious. I've had people watching the shelter around the clock. Not even a fly could escape without our knowledge. Could there be another exit? Shi Daong, pounding his chest in frustration, speculated. There must be. Our West Mountain base has several emergency exits. It must be an inside job. Someone leaked our operation timings, allowing him to attack our base fearlessly. Ling Feng's eyes lit up. Indeed, the West Mountain base has a few emergency exits, and I've heard Qin Xinyan has a private one. A shelter of Zhang Yi's level wouldn't just have one exit. If that's the case, our tunnel digging plan must also be compromised. Continuing the excavation is pointless now. At that moment, a soldier hurried over. Captain Ling, during the villager head count, we found that the local mutant Su Chunlei is missing, and there's no sign of his body. Also, Captain Lian Yu hasn't returned to the unit. Hearing this, Ling Feng was even more furious. Gritting his teeth, he said, "It seems we have more than one traitor." He decided to immediately set off, following the tracks of the snowmobile. The village head, at a loss, lamented, "So many villagers died digging that tunnel, and now you tell me it was all for nothing. How am I supposed to explain this to everyone?" Chunlei, entering the shelter, was almost overwhelmed by the sight before him. Zhang Yi had prepared a room full of figurines, tapes, and pillows for him. Zhang Yi told Chunlei, "From now on, you'll live here." Chunlei, overjoyed, jumped onto the bed and hugged the pillow tightly. "From now on, I, Su Chunlei, am willing to go through fire and water for brother Zhang, never shirking even in the face of death." Then, Zhang Yi went to the control room. With the information provided by Lian Yu and the equipment at hand, Yang Xinxin quickly hacked into the West Mountain Base's network. She confidently informed Zhang Yi, "Now I can paralyze the West Mountain Base's network at any time and cut off the communication between the dispatched troops and their base." Zhang Yi patted Yang Xinxin on the head in praise. "Well done. Once we deal with West Mountain Base's top forces, the threat we face will diminish significantly." He then addressed Lian Yu, "As long as you provide me with enough value, I will naturally fulfill my promise to you. But before that, you still need to work for the safety of your students." At that moment, the monitor showed Ling Feng and his team had found the emergency exit. Zhang Yi smiled devilishly. "Just watch. The show is about to begin." Meanwhile, Ling Feng and his team followed the snowmobile tracks, which eventually led them to a cemetery and then disappeared. Judging by the distance to the shelter, they concluded that this was undoubtedly the emergency exit. Shi Daong was furious. "After killing so many of our brothers, I'll tear Zhang Yi apart when we catch him." Suddenly, a soldier pointed into the distance, shouting, "Zhang Yi is over there." Shi Daong didn't hesitate and lunged forward, shouting, "Zhang Yi, you scoundrel, I'll tear you into 1,000 pieces." Xing Shuerong quickly tried to stop him, saying, "Shi Daong, don't be impulsive, come back." By this time, Shi Daong had transformed into an ape-man, swearing to make Zhang Yi pay with blood. Zhang Yi, however, was not the least bit panicked. Dealing with this kind of brave but reckless man, Zhang Yi was confident. He raised his sniper rifle and fired 3 shots. At such a distance, Zhang Yi would never miss, but he deliberately aimed off to lure Shi Daong closer to the trap he had set. Just as Shi Daong was about to reach him, Zhang Yi swiftly stepped on the detonator he had buried earlier. Instantly, a snowstorm several dozen meters high erupted, blocking his vision. At this moment, Xing Shuerong, Ling Feng, and others also caught up. Meanwhile, Lian Yu, wielding the dragon's roar, stood in front of them with Flower by her side. Ling Feng angrily accused Lian Yu, "How dare you betray the base? Don't you want to save your students?" Lian Yu didn't want to waste words with them. Most of her students had died in their human experiments, and she had long hated the base to the core. She shouted, "Our paths are different. We cannot plan together. I have nothing to say to you." With that, she swung her knife at Ling Feng. Flower, behind her, suddenly pounced at Xing Shuerong. Xing Shuerong's skills were mainly defensive. She intended to block Flower's attack with an ice wall, but she clearly underestimated the power of Flower's claws. In an instant, she was killed. Ling Feng, in disbelief, looked back to see Xing Shuerong lying in a pool of blood. While Ling Feng was skillfully dodging Lian Yu's dragon's roar, a huge explosion suddenly occurred behind him. When the dust settled, Shi Daong was seen covered in nails, lying on the ground, having lost his ability to fight. Shi Daong looked helplessly at Ling Feng, but it was too late. Zhang Yi, carrying the sniper rifle, fired another shot, eliminating any chance of Shi Daong getting up again. As he fired, Zhang Yi shouted, "Chunlei, it's your turn now." Chunlei appeared behind them, seemingly out of nowhere. With both hands charged, he immediately sealed off the retreat of the remaining Special Forces soldiers. At this moment, Lian Yu didn't linger in her fight with Ling Feng. She mounted Flower and took the opportunity to flee the scene, simultaneously pulling Chunlei along with her, escaping at a high speed. Meanwhile, Zhang Yi stood atop a hill, looking down at the Special Forces soldiers trapped in the ice and snow. Ling Feng, with a look of disdain, said to Zhang Yi, "You don't think mere ice and snow can trap me, do you?" Zhang Yi let out a cold laugh. The real show was just beginning. Zhang Yi instantly activated the dimensional gate, releasing all the TNT he had previously stored in a different space. Except for Ling Feng himself, the remaining Special Forces soldiers were all modified beings with Ling Feng's cells transplanted. At the critical moment, Ling Feng ordered everyone to dive into the snow. This move indeed saved them from a lot of impact damage. After the explosion, Ling Feng and his team emerged from the snow in a disheveled state. Before they could recover, a soldier suddenly shouted, "Captain, look up there." By the time Ling Feng looked forward, a massive avalanche was already upon them, leaving no time to react. Everyone was instantly buried under the thick snow. Zhang Yi called Lu Karen and Yang Xinxin in the control room. "Thanks to you two geniuses, I could deal with these scums so easily." As it turned out, Yang Xinxin had used computer modeling to precisely calculate the location of the avalanche, and Lu Karen's explosives were designed with just the right power. Coupled with Zhang Yi's strategy of luring the enemy into a trap, they executed a seamless, perfect coordination, catching their opponents off guard. This is all because they were too foolish and greedy, thinking I was just prey to be hunted. Little did they know that they themselves were the lambs to be slaughtered. Of course, this couldn't have been done without the significant help of Liang Yu and Chun Lei, who helped me lead them step by step into the abyss. Liang Yu began to worry. "I used all my strength against Ling Feng just now and didn't manage to harm him at all. If we can't confirm his death, it will be difficult for me to ensure a safe retreat in another encounter." Zhang Yi, however, was full of confidence. "Don't worry about that." Lu Karen had already placed infrared robots in advance. With the thickness of this avalanche and the temperature dropping to -80 degrees, no matter how skilled he has no room to maneuver. In less than 10 minutes, they will be frozen into ice sculptures. That night, Zhang Yi prepared a lavish dinner to treat everyone. Reflecting on the scenes that had unfolded since the apocalypse, Zhang Yi couldn't help but feel emotional. Everything finally seems to have come to an end. Now, with West Mountain Base losing its top combat power and Yang Xinxin's Trojan horse revealing all the secrets to those at the bottom, they will bring about their own destruction without us having to lift a finger. Shokir also expressed her feelings. "I never imagined so much could happen in just a few months. It all feels like a dream. I'm so lucky to have met you, Brother Zhang." Zhang Yi looked affectionately at Shokir. "The only constant in this world is change. Just like the once dominant dinosaurs couldn't escape their fate of extinction, this extreme cold wave was just another evolution in the long river of history. Being one of the few survivors is something we should all be grateful for." Thus, Zhang Yi began a shameless life with 5 women and a chubby man. This manga has reached its conclusion. For updates on whether there will be a sequel, please follow Manga Explained. We'll update as soon as any sequel is released.